The first two readings today almost sound too romantically idealistic. At a time when, in many places all over the world, so many marriages end up in divorce within the first 10 years. Marriage, and family life for that matter, do not appear as rosy and saccharine as how Sirach may paint it to be. Sirach's exhortations just do not sound realistic. In third world countries like the Philippines, where families try their darndest best to form their children and instill in them the impossible dream of family communion, mostly by proxy, that is through the real heroes in my country next to overseas workers, the grandparents. Sirach's reminders for children to honor and revere their cyberspace father or mother may be asking for too much. Having been an educator over the past 40 plus years, a priest for 37, I have seen firsthand how family communion and intimacy are values that are hard to come by in our times for both affluent and so-called developing countries. As a classroom teacher for many years, a counselor to young people by as many, I have seen from close ranks the sad stories of young people whose initial pining for parent, a natural desire for attachment, becomes replaced by either insecure or avoidant patterns of attachment for either parent or avoidant patterns, both of whom they never got to know, whom they simply will never learn to warm up to. Having been a formator in the seminary setting for many years, I know for a fact from first-hand experience that many a vocation to the priesthood or religious life gets dashed in the shoals of insecure, undifferentiated, family of origin engendered lack of a sense of self and inadequate self-definition. The family is surely taking a beating for these past decades. Some people blame reality TV for it. No, TV merely reflects reality that is already there and caters to people already immersed in situations that only are waiting for symbolic representations. For decades, all of human society has been busy constructing the reality for itself. We all have been part and participant of the grand narrative that we are weaving with what we read, what we do, what we watch, what we talk about, what jokes we say to each other, what songs and shows we produce. Hollywood alone does not produce these narratives. They serve as sounding boards, verbalizers, codifiers of said reality. The story of all of us write with our daily lives. The family is a big story that we write. And that story is something that could use a little help from another meta-narrative, a big story that is, based on God's story. God's story, His story, is history. The history of a people loved and called by God for all time, to intimacy, to relationality, to relationships, to communion. That story began with a call to relationships. It is not good for man to be alone. That story grew with a series of other calls to other relationships. And God brought everything to man to see what he would call them. The man gave names to all the cattle, all the birds of the air, and all the wild animals. That story progressed to even greater callings, that of Abraham, called to be a father of a multitude of nations, that of Moses, called as a leader of a pilgrim people, and that of so many others, all the way to the time of Joseph and Mary, called to take part in a momentous portion of this saga of salvation. The family is a story that we all ought to weave together. Thus, in Sirach's exhortations, sons and daughters are enjoined to respect parents. Paul, for his part, refuses to wallow in people's little stories of grievances against one another, bitterness and discouragement. Such petty stories, the daily trivia that mar and tar our serenity and peace, our closeness and healthy attachment to each other, ought to be reframed by compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience, bearing with one another, and forgiving one another. But now some of you, my readers, might well complain, aren't we back to saccharine idealisms? Is this really possible? Can we really revise the stories that we tell each other? Is it indeed possible? And this is where the reason why Holy Mother Church added today's feast in the liturgical calendar lies. The Church presents the story of Jesus, Mary, and Joseph as an alternative to the story that we write with our daily lives. The story is not one for the imagineering world of Disney and Disneyland. Joseph's family, like the family of today, was battered and bruised as they were just starting the first chapter. The life of their newborn infant child was threatened soon after birth. In our times, lives of babies are threatened much earlier, even before they are born. Cozy and feeling safe in his sleep, perhaps throwing himself into bed after hours of planning for his fledgling family of 3, he was challenged in a dream by something that was not exactly welcome news. Arise, take the child and his mother to Egypt and stay there until I tell you. Before teary-eyed and sorrowing mothers and fathers flew to far-off lands to work for their children's future, the whole family of Joseph already experienced being rudely uprooted, displaced, and banished afar, owing to the murderous envy of a powerful man who wanted to rewrite history in his own terms. The story of the Holy Family is no saccharine and romantic ideal that is written only in fairy tales of Neverland. Neither is the story of each and every one of us a story of imperfect parents, rebellious teenagers, less than satisfactory growing up conditions, petty stories of misunderstandings, etc. But precisely because our stories are marred by imperfections, we would do well to give a close look at the story of this fledgling family, unified by a call to compassion, a call to conversation with a God who reveals himself in dreams, a call to communion and to commitment, understood as dedication to each other's welfare, to each other's equally imperfect stories. Only then can we dream God's ultimate dream for us, his people, an eternal celebration with God, who is family, who is love, who is all about relationships. Glory be to God who is Father. Glory be to God who is Son. Glory be to God who is Holy Spirit, giver, gifted, gifting, since then, till now, till then. His story still unfolds. His story becomes us. And as we take part and cooperate with His will, His story becomes ever so gradually, ever so subtly, history. Our history. This is your Kalakbay at Katoto saying thank you and God bless you and Merry Christmas pa rin po.